Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. One of the neatest things about the Lutheran hymnal my congregation uses concerns the last hymn in the book. Now, some might argue that it's not really the last hymn. We do have a section of national songs or patriotic hymns after the hymn I'm talking about. But if you look at hymns with the primary focus being on God, our last hymn before those national songs is, "Oh, for a thousand tongues to sing." I love that. The placement of that hymn as the last one says that after over 800 songs singing praise to God, I want only to continue and sing of God's praise even more. It's the perfect way to end the hymnal. Back in January, I dedicated 1 week of Pastor Gary Live to telling you about some of the great women and men who are remembered by the church in January for the heritage of faith that they left us. Then I did the same thing in February. Their lives of faith serve to inspire our own living out of our faith. This week, I hope to continue the pattern and tell you about those we remember in March. One thing to remind you of, we remember these folks on their death days because we consider that their birthday in heaven. The reason I started off by telling you about the hymn, "Oh, for a thousand tongues to sing," was because it was written by Charles Wesley. Charles is well known as one of the greatest and most prolific composer of hymns in the 1700s. In fact, a quick look at the index in my hymnal showed that we use 10 different hymns written by Charles, and almost all of them are well known. He wrote, "Love divine, all loves excelling. Open now thy gates of beauty. Jesus Christ is risen today. Hark, the herald angels sing." And of course, "Oh, for a thousand tongues to sing," along with as many as 6,000 other hymns. As amazing as that may seem, Charles is not nearly as significant as his brother John, and we remember both of them on March 2nd, which was the day of John's death. Perhaps one of the most significant influences on John and Charles was their mother, a woman named Susanna. She and her husband had Puritan roots, and Susanna was a demanding mother and imparted in her sons a sense of holiness and seriousness about their faith that they never lost. John was ordained in 1728 and Charles in 1735, but soon their dissatisfaction with the Church of England grew. In that time, the Church of England was in serious decline. Worship was dull and formal. Buildings had fallen into decay. The poor were neglected, and many clergy were appointed for political reasons. The Wesley brothers attempted renewal of the English church by taking seriously the obligations of the Christian life. They founded a group called the Holy Society, intended for those dissatisfied with the church, and they emphasized frequent communion, fasting twice a week, and extensive social work among the poor and needy. Their, quote, "method of faith" earned them a name that was meant to make fun of them, and they began to be called the Methodists. Eventually, they broke from the Church of England and joined with the Moravians. In May of 1738, John was meeting with them when the preface to Luther's commentary on the Romans was read, and John felt his heart strangely warmed. After that, he dedicated his life to evangelistic endeavors. For a time, both brothers left England and came to Georgia in the New World. Charles came as a secretary to the governor of Georgia, James Oglethorpe, and John as an itinerant preacher. After they returned to England, it is said that John traveled more than 250,000 miles on horseback all over England and preached more than 40,000 sermons, often several each day. John wrote prolifically and edited other works, doing most of it on horseback. He wrote in his journal, "I look upon all the world as my parish. Thus far I mean that in whatever part of it I am in, I judge it meet, right, and my bound in duty to declare unto all that are willing to hear the glad tidings of salvation, that is the work which I know God has called me to do. And sure I am that his blessing attends to it." The work of John with his brother Charles led to the founding of the Methodist Church. Now, I began today's episode by talking about the hymns left by Charles, so let me end with something from John. Of the many things he wrote, my favorite is a prayer I have shared with you before. I think it's a prayer we need to pray more often. His simple, profound prayer was, "Less of me, more of thee." Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.